G'day, Aisha Mahara here. Are people with borderline personality disorder frauds in relationships any more than people with codependency are frauds in a relationship? If that's the way we want to look at this, or in what I've termed here and keeps whatever I say here gets copied elsewhere. Shall we just put it that way? But these situationships between people with borderline personality and people with codependency. Well, how can it be said, people can say whatever they want, but if you think about it, how does it make sense that the person with BPD is just an emotional fraud and the person with codependency isn't, in a different way, similarly, emotionally, somewhat fraudulent? Somewhat. Well, what do I mean by that? Well, people with BPD aren't really frauds because they don't have the conscious awareness of who they are. So not everything they're doing is consciously on purpose. So people with codependency have ideas about who they are, right? But they might not, they don't know themselves as well, at least relationally and within relationships, significant other especially, but maybe others in their lives. So you don't know yourself as well as a codependent as you might think that you did. So what happens when the borderline and the the codependent come together? Well, people have asked me, does that mean that people are being made codependent or turned into codependents, or whatever language you want to use, by the person with BPD? And the answer is no, because it could it worsen codependency? Perhaps, but it would be the adverse experience of that and in the relationship and these relational dynamics that do not work out. But there's really no accuracy to this idea that people with BPD are, so trying to fool you, so responsible for the codependent choice to get into the relationship. It's not a consciously, it's a choice by the person with BPD and a choice by the person with codependency. Get attracted to each other, man to woman, woman to woman, man to man on the surface, but don't understand what's going on with the wounded inner child and that pull to the familiar chaos and drama of it all. So with that, it's like I've referred to it before. It's an unconscious setup that's really not going to work out for the person with BPD or the codependent. But neither party knows at the beginning of these relationships, if it's your first relationship with somebody with BPD, then you have no idea what's going to happen. And you have no idea that the person that you're falling in love with, and codependents tend to do this and really get not pulled in, really are on board with the speed and intensity of the borderlines want to connect and to merge and to make an insta relationship, basically, because there's a voracious emotional hunger that people with codependency have. This emotional hunger to be seen and to be heard that I've talked about before. And that meets with the idealization, the mirroring, and the person with BPD's codependent people-pleasing, to where you're just getting the most amazing feedback you've ever got in your life. And so even a healthier process of falling in love brings with it boundaries come down, and it's very exciting in the beginning, and then it goes on through different stages. A healthy relationship with healthy love would be go on through different stages to where people aren't constantly or more or less trying to get back into the quote falling in love stage. So healthy relationships move forward and love builds, and some people out there call that boring, but love builds, and communication and the interdependence in healthy relationships It's all very, as I know with my relationship right now with my partner, it's very comfortable, it's exciting, it's got a lot to it too. But it's not like when a codependent with voracious emotional hunger to be seen and to be heard and to be validated within codependency, to just be head over heels over somebody with the intensity of a person with untreated BPD and everything that goes with that package. But it's really important for people with codependency to realize that you did make your own decision. The person with BPD didn't make you do anything. They can't make you do anything. And then, so you fall in love kind of rather quickly in a really intense situation, which some people with codependency like are pulling back a little bit from and going, this seems a lot like really quick. And some people don't even notice that. And it's the voracious emotional hunger in people with codependency. And for people with BPD, it's a mad rush to merge and enmesh with you and seek their identity through you, which they don't know that. You might not be aware of how voracious your emotional hunger to be seen and heard and validated is if you're codependent. So it really is this unconscious setup wherein each party is not aware of what's about to happen for the other or themselves. And then people with codependency get so not only ruminating on, but just fixated on, gotta get after the first evaluation, split evaluation, and when the honeymoon phase is over, then people with codependency are just so fixated on getting back that person, the person that you fell in love with, who isn't really who the borderline is. And I've talked a lot about this. But the point is, it's not like it's love fraud. It's not like the borderline is doing this intentionally to fool you. And it's not like people with codependency don't have to kind of, without... So in that unconscious setup of it, right, person with BPD doesn't know what's going to happen either, even if it's happened to them before. And if they're untreated, because they just don't have that conscious awareness. And people with codependency will have no idea what's going to happen if it's the first time you've ever been in a relationship or dating a person with BPD. So people with BPD untreated might not be able to take personal responsibility, but codependents really need to, because codependence might be really painful and hard and beyond difficult, but it's really important to know that the borderline doesn't seduce you. The borderline doesn't make you do anything. And in these situationships, how inaccurate it is for a person with codependency to just lay it all at the feet of the borderline and go, well, they fooled me, they made me do it. They were the one they were emotional frauds. Well, they don't turn out to be who you thought they were, do they? But it's not like they had a placard out that was advertising that everything they were showing you right then and there was the real deal, because they don't know the difference. So these relationships are unconscious setups, and everybody gets hurt, unfortunately, or specifically people with codependency get very hurt. People with BPD do too, but they hurt you more than you hurt them, I suppose it's accurate to say. And the other thing is, and their hurt is coming from a very deep primal place of repetition compulsion cycles. But then there are repetition compulsion cycles in codependency as well. So I think it's just really important for people to take their own personal responsibility when you can, when you have codependency, because this will be part of your working out. Why did you get in this in the first place? And that you can't really blame. You can, but it's not healthy. It's going to keep you stuck. It's not going to help you to get into a healing recovery journey, which I'm out here to help you with if you resonate with me. If you keep blaming the borderline for having somehow hoodwinked you and pulled you into this relationship, that really, for people with codependency, and I say this with empathy, compassion, no judgment and understanding, because I've recovered from codependency, but I've been there as well. You really need to take responsibility for the choices that you made, even though you didn't know exactly what was going on. People with codependency have, as I've said before, their own repetition compulsion cycles of why, learned in childhood with adverse childhood experience, why you're in a pursuit pattern. Intimacy issues, fear of abandonment, a lot of things that are similar to people with BPD, people with codependency are struggling with as well. And so if you were really ready for healthy intimacy, you likely wouldn't be in a place where you end up in this relationship. But it's the unconscious setup of it. And again, it's not emotional or love fraud on the part of the borderline. And then what? You have no responsibility for your own choices, albeit that you couldn't consciously know what was going to happen, but it's codependent, voracious, emotional hunger to be seen and heard that gets people into these circumstances, situations, relationships, situationships, without you having any conscious idea about what could happen. Because you can't know what borderline personality disorder is before you encounter it. And people with BPD, they're not all diagnosed. The untreated ones, whether diagnosed or not, are denying it. They don't get the connection between what happens when they relate to someone else, how they impact someone else. And people with codependency have, like I said, no reference for what's going to happen with this voracious hunger when somebody's finally seeing you and hearing you. Like, it's amazing, and it's the first time in your life you've ever felt so seen, so heard, so loved. And then it sets up an addiction, and it sets up the unhealthy bond, and it sets up people with codependency to really be fixated on getting that person who never really was real, didn't come with a sign that said, this is really, I'm fantastic, and etc. But it's an unconscious setup. So I think it's really important that people take responsibility, because this is what you need as a codependent, I would say, gently, to take responsibility for your own choices, even though, yes, of course you didn't know. But now, how can that help you? Well, it can help you, getting into healing and recovery, like I said. And it can help you with taking back some autonomy, which can start to change ever so slowly in a very painful time. It can start to make change for you, and it can, through radical acceptance of what is and what happened, when you figure that out, when you're aware of that. And it's also important that people with codependency realize that not blaming the borderline for what happened to you, in the sense that you, as if you didn't make a decision to enter the relationship even though you didn't know what was going to happen, then it will help you with some of that fixation and cognitive dissonance and ruminating when you keep just thinking about the pursuit, whether you're talking to them anymore or no contact. The emotional pursuit within you, that still voracious, even more so voracious now after the BPD relationship breakup, emotional hunger to be seen and heard and validated, because this is driving people with codependency and has been driving you all your life since your early childhood, or whatever age in childhood your codependency began from adverse childhood experience. But unbeknownst to most people with codependency, these relationships with borderlines or narcissists tend to trigger and really bring to consciousness, along with information out here like my channel and others, about codependency, so people can start to understand, yes, okay. And it's very painful. Codependency is very formidable, but you can't just blame the borderline. And if you, you could, but how's it going to help you to do that? How's it going to help you to get unfixated with who they really aren't? More to the point, stop pursuing and seeking to try to see if they can be again who they really weren't, who you thought they were, who you fell in love with. See, people with codependency, especially significantly to severely, your love is not healthy love either. It's not maybe in the same lack of love as people with untreated BPD, but it's not a healthy pattern of love. And the overgiving and the rescuing and the enabling and the trying to fix someone else to get your needs met. But you learn that in childhood. Don't be hard on yourself. Unfortunately, you've learned it in childhood due to adverse childhood experience. And that's something that you have to radically separate now, and it hurts a lot. But radical acceptance of what is will help you to find your way to the next steps in your healing and recovery journey. And like I said, I'm out here to work with you and help you with this if I resonate with you. So it's not that the borderline is all to blame for the relationship the way it began. Whatever they do later in the relationship is their responsibility that they can't exactly, if they're untreated, be held to. But yeah, I'm not saying to people with codependency, everything is your responsibility. No. But it will help you so much, even though it feels impossible, and you might not even like the sound of what I'm saying in this video, but it will help you to take personal responsibility for the choices that you made, even though you couldn't know what you were getting into and what would happen. Because when you do that, you start to free up a little bit of the rumination and the fixation that is protective for people with codependency, that keeps you in that pursuit mode, even when you might be full no contact. But emotionally rolling around in your head is pursuit mode, to get more of the voracious emotional hunger to be seen and heard and validated, to get more of that satiated. People with this, not the same as people with BPD, but people with codependency need to get into therapy and their own healing recovery journeys to be able to have that healthy, create that healthy relationship to and with yourself, know yourself better than you did before, and of course know yourself a lot better now, because you lost more of yourself in the relationship to the person with BPD. The BPD, it's not all the borderline's fault, because they don't know consciously any better in most cases than the codependent. They don't have a conscious awareness of their repetition compulsion patterns. And when you meet that person that you don't know has BPD or what it is, what you need to own as a codependent, realize for yourself, will help you in your journey to heal and recover, is that you too had your own repetition compulsion cycle of what you needed and how you relate, which isn't totally a healthy relational pattern, codependency, but unbeknownst to you in your conscious mind as well. And so it makes these relationships an unconscious setup for both parties in a way, but I'm not measuring. So people with codependency, when you're in that world of hurt, when you're coming, which borderlines are always in, but when you're coming out of the relationship and you're starting to understand, or you're still in the relationship, but now you're watching some videos, you're doing some research, you're reading books, and you're starting to understand, kind of what happened, even though it still doesn't make sense. It gives you cognitive and emotional dissonance. It's so important for you to take responsibility that you made a choice, and yes, based on who you thought they were, they made a choice based on who they thought that they were, but more to the point, the unconscious nature of borderline repetition compulsion cycles, that they were looking through for identity through you. But this is not known to the codependent consciously, that you have this voracious emotional hunger to be seen, heard, and validated, because in your childhood you weren't seen and heard or validated, or not enough, and you don't know how to do that for yourself. And that is part of what creates this dysfunctional relationship to and with yourself as a codependent. And so it's not like the person with BPD was an emotional fraud, because there's aspects of people with BPD that they don't understand in their repetition compulsions cycles, and there's aspects of what people with codependency don't understand about their relational pattern and style and repetition compulsions. So the whole thing comes together, and I know I don't have to tell people what happens after that sooner or later, what a mess it is, how hurtful it is, how painful it is, and then some. But it's really important to take your responsibility. And yeah, that might sound like super unfair, which isn't a helpful adult word, actually, emotionally speaking, because the person with BPD may never, or certainly not while you know them, or you're still trying to talk to them or get back with them, or whatever the case, they're not going to be taking personal responsibility anytime soon if they remain untreated. So where codependents can do better and can do a little more for themselves, really important that you do it. instead of layering on the meaning and the narrative that they were out to trick you, people with BPD, that they were out to fool you, that they just, pulled you into the whole thing. Because people with BPD don't have that much power. They really don't. And then why is it that people with codependency, like, if you can't hear what I'm saying yet, why would it be that you would get so involved in that if you didn't have voracious emotional hunger to be seen and heard and validated from without? Why would you have a pattern of externalizing, rescuing, enabling, and fixing and trying to play the hero? Because, to get your needs met. Well, this starts in childhood. So nobody in adulthood with codependency is thinking in any kind of transactional way that they're giving to get. It's not that conscious, and it's not that exactly like that, though there's an element of course you want to receive back. You want mutuality and reciprocity, but guess what? A lot of people with codependency didn't get that emotional mutuality or reciprocity in your childhood either, which may have been part of the wounding as to why you developed codependency in the first place. So, really important for people with codependency to take responsibility for the choices that you made that weren't fully informed with the fact that maybe you didn't know you had codependency, maybe you didn't understand this, and of course maybe for more people than not you never heard of BPD and you couldn't imagine this. That's all true and fair enough. And people with BPD, even if they've been through it before, they're not consciously aware of their repetition cycle, like I said. So the apex of this is a smacking together. It feels great. But then, unfortunately, as people know, the split to devaluation and the agony of it all, and then some. And then actually so many people right now are making decisions to reverse Hoover or take the Hoover of a untreated borderline X. They go around and recycle the relationship over and over. Some people over and over and over and over and over, etc. Some people at least one time. And you're just signing up for more pain. And if you can be entertaining because it feels really compelling, right? But this is your codependency. This is your voracious hunger, emotional hunger, to be seen and validated and heard and loved. But again, you're going to put your precious self in harm's way with a person untreated with BPD that's already hurt you in many different ways, or maybe most of the ways that they can hurt people. And then so many people with codependency go back around again, because the unhealthiest thing about people with codependency and that pattern of relating is not only the voracious emotional hunger to be seen, to be heard, to be loved, to be validated, but the realization that you don't have a healthy relationship to and with yourself. You might not know that yet or what that means. But so a lot of people with codependency are going to like the first man or woman that you're attracted to, and your inner child is like a Geiger counter looking for what's familiar and chaotic in a subconscious effort to seek reparation. And these relationships, there's no reparation to them, in recycling them. The really hard, keeping it real truth here is you need to go no contact. You need to not reverse Hoover. You need to stop, allowing the person with BPD, the X, to Hoover you. And then you need to get into therapy to help with how impossible all that feels, how painful it is. All of the aspects of what people are going through after these relationships break up in whichever way they do. So if you have codependency, don't be too hard on yourself, but just know you have responsibility in choices you made that you couldn't have imagined what was going to happen. It's an unconscious setup. Not true to say people with BPD are the ones totally responsible for an emotional fraud, if you will, or for emotionally fooling you or doing this to you on purpose. That's not what happens with people with borderline personality. And people with borderline personality, it's not a form of narcissistic personality. And people with codependency aren't borderlines, and you're not narcissistic, but you do have to realize that you have formidable woundedness that goes back to childhood that you need to get into therapy for, and that blaming the borderline for everything is just going to continue your suffering and keep you from going where you need and likely want to go in healing, recovering, and feeling better after these disastrously painful situationships, because they're not really the relational nightmares, mostly because of the person with BPD and partly because of the codependent, relational, unhealthy style as well, which I'm not comparing to those with BPD. So let me know under the video how you feel about it, what's your experience. Is this something that you don't agree with? Do you think maybe it's something that you might need to hear, but you're not really enjoying hearing it? Because again, I'm here to keep it real, to help you heal, and it's going to mean that I'm going to be giving some messages out here with some information for people that might not be new for everybody. But for some people, my hope is that, not that it hurts you, I mean, it may hurt, I don't intend that, but sometimes we have to feel pain in order to work for more change and understanding. But the hope is that people will, realize more about a narrative that's keeping you stuck. So that's what you need to take responsibility about, to do with these relationships, and not blame the borderline lest you keep yourself stuck, because your only way forward now in therapy is in recovery from the relationship and codependency and your childhood, inner child woundedness, etc., is to take responsibility. And it's going to be and mean moving through some really painful, seemingly impossible territory. And yet I work with clients who do it all the time. And it doesn't mean it's simple. But I'm out here to work with you if I resonate with you the way that I work with people. I have 30 years of experience doing this. And people really do get through the process. And people do come out the other side. People learn, they grow, they heal. And what's at the base of that for anyone is you need to take personal responsibility. So take care. Buttons.